Why I don't believe that shoving our religious belief to other people is the best way for us to actually evangelize. Um, for me, my faith is very important to me. It's very intimate. It's the reason why I do a lot of my call to contribute to the world. My personal relationship with our Lord is something that I've had since I was 18 years old. And to me, it's very important to me. Um, but once upon a time, I didn't have faith. Once upon a time, I was that woman who did not have the privilege of somebody sharing with me the importance of the freedom that comes with a personal relationship with God and having and believing in something greater than ourselves and knowing that the buck doesn't stop at us. There's a part of me that feels like it's very damaging when we say, well, this is what's right and this is the truth. And if you don't follow it, then you're going to hell. Or if you don't follow it, you're a bad person. And it doesn't mean that it's not accurate, right? It doesn't mean that the person that's saying, well, you need to, you know, make sure you pray every single day, unless or else you're going to hell. It doesn't mean that that's necessarily accurate, but I think the method in which we invite people to greater faith is equally as important to, I think, being able to give people the fullness of truth. The messenger matters. If I tell people, well, God said that you need to be kind and the Bible is the truth and that you need to love your neighbors, and I am yelling at you when telling you at the same time to love your neighbors, it's really hypocritical. I think that faith is a journey. It's a tender journey that is between you and God. And there's a lot of unraveling that needs to happen and learning and awareness of the human person. And I think that if we truly believe that God is in every human person, we need to honor and respect their journey and not shove truth down their throat. It becomes hypocritical and it becomes really repelling. And instead of us living a life of invitation, we are actually causing more division because we are shoving truth down people's throat. It doesn't mean that we're being weak about it. It doesn't mean that you can't stand your ground and say, this is what I believe. And my faith has led me to believe that, being a man and being a woman is, that's what we were born with. But telling people and making fun of people who don't believe the same thing, or not having the kindness to say, why do you believe what you believe? Explain that to me. Help me understand your thought process. I think to me, that's more effective than my way or the highway. And we need to be strategic about evangelization, and evangelizing people to truth requires us to actually be a walking presence of truth, which is love itself. And we need to be, I think telling is repelling, and we need to be strategic about how we want to evangelize. And the current state of our culture is that a lot of people no longer believe in God. Our church is bleeding, and people feel like there's a lot of hypocrisy in religion and a lot of hypocrisy in the church. And we can deny it and say, well, it doesn't matter because this is the truth. And, people are just going to have to, choose truth. Well, yes, that is true. But you have a responsibility to invite people to truth. You have a responsibility to live truth, to live love, to live charity, to live kindness. And the way you live it is will either open, people to the church or let them run away with it. I mean, what Gandhi said, he said, I actually believe, I'm butchering it, but I actually believe in, the Christian faith and the Bible, only is that I'm not seeing people who are actually living it. Now, that's not actually accurate because there's plenty of people who actually live the faith. But it should cause us to reflect and constantly reflect on how am I bringing people closer to God, not by what I tell them, but how I've inspired them to breathe life in them. Let me give you an example. We were in church and this beautiful lady was doing an announcement of how we are going to welcome people. And this is what she said. She says, I want to welcome everybody here and that you're welcome here. And please come to the church service. It was, the words she was saying was accurate. The words she was saying were true. It was welcoming people and that she wanted everybody to be invited. But if we don't understand that 7% of our in the communication skill, words are only 7%, 38% tonality, and 55% body language, we could not actually evangelize people and lead them to the church simply because we're unaware of how we are communicating as a skill set. Because if, my children actually pointed out and they're like, Mom, she didn't look happy. And there's a part of me that feels like, yeah, that is true. Why would my children go there if it's not inviting? If it's not, doesn't sound like there's joy in their voice. And I had no answer except for the fact that I told my children, some people don't know how to communicate and it's not their fault. We have to see past it. But imagine if we were tender and we're kind and we say, my name is January Donovan, and I want to thank you for being here. And I just truly believe that we need to be a community of people. And I want to invite you and serve you and see if we can gather together and just get to know each other, learn about who you are, celebrate each other, and maybe continue to see how we can serve you, not how you can serve the church. Because that's often what I am seeing is that, what can you do for the church? What can you do for the church? What can the church do for the people to serve them to be happier individuals? And I think that's what I mean by we have to think strategically about how we evangelize and not just shove truth down people's throat, and start thinking of how we can be living temples and examples of truth itself by allowing people to experience our goodness, our joy, our presence. And really it goes back to, to inspire people is to breathe life into people. The life that Christ has brought in us should be replicated or should be radiated, right, to the people around us. Because to tell people that Christ is fully alive and is the light of Christ, and we have no light within us because we sound dead, well, that sounds hypocritical. And our children, more importantly, can smell that right away. They smell hypocrisy like none other. But also the world will be robbed of the fullness of truth, of our ability to spread really, Christ, because we are not really representing God. And sometimes I hear the tonality of people who want so badly to bring people closer to the faith, and they sound angry, or they're not enthusiastic, right? Enthused comes from the words theo, means with God. Well, we have to be thinking in depths and layers and strategically thinking, what is the source right now of why people are not actually coming to church? It's a very complicated answer. And for me, we need to go back to the basic of what it means to be human and what it means to be human that is fully alive, that will attract people to the fullness of truth. And I think there's also a part of me that feels like, the church has done a lot of things that have come to light, whether it's the scandal, whether it's financial scandal, or, the pedophilia, where we kind of need to atone for that. And we have to kind of be humble enough to be like, you know what? We've messed up, and we need accountability, and we need humility, and we need to own up to the fact that maybe we have lost, the most basic foundation of what it means to be charitable and to be kind. Maybe we've become so heady and that intellectual that we think, okay, this is how we need to evangelize people, that we need to make sure we have apologetics, and this is what, we need to tell people what we need to do, as opposed to actually making people feel valued making people feel important. Imagine if we were in the business of making people feel important and making them feel valued, and not just telling them what they need to be, who they need to be, and what the values are and what the virtues are, without making them feel it. The reality is that emotion causes us motion, which means we are moved towards that thing that we want to invite them to, if they feel that they are valued human beings. And we cannot take away the emotion of how we make people feel, because the reason why people might not be coming to church is that they don't feel valued as a human being. Maybe somebody is unaware of, the way they're communicating, and it's making people feel like, well, why should I be part of this church? This feels negative and dead and not feel alive. Let me go elsewhere. That is a missed opportunity. And I know that for myself as a mother, where I'm like, oh, I want to surround my children with a fullness of truth, with joy, with peace, with feeling alive, with, being positive, with being kind, collaborative, and not competing with each other, not comparing with each other, where we want to be in that space, because that space actually brings out the best in us. And it begins with us actually having life within us. And that's why I feel like if we were tender and we were kind and we invested in our own growth, then we can be patient in other people's faith journey, and we can love them where they're at while they're growing to becoming greater than their current self. And we can love them and believe in them and hope in them and encourage them, instead of making them feel bad for not doing the things that we think they're supposed to be doing, what's right. I just think that there needs to be a new way of being, and a new way of being might not be popular. And it means that we have to look from within and say, am I positive when I'm around people? Do I tell people who they need to be and tell, or do I take time to be curious about people and listen to them and pay attention to them? Does my facial expression express genuine care? Is my facial expression mean and crabby? And do I have a bad attitude that actually repels people from the church? Make no mistake, the way you show up at every God-given moment either repels people from the church or brings people from the church, whether you're near the church or not. You are a walking testimony. If you are a woman of faith and you believe that you are here to bring people closer to God, then there is no, it's not a one and done. It's not just when you're in church, it's every living part of you. Instead of maybe, discouraging people or being so negative and bringing people down and saying, well, you can't do this, you can't do it. What if you were a woman of hope? What if you were the one who encouraged people, who believed in people, who hoped in them, who was walking radiance of a smile and a joy? Can you even imagine if we had a challenge where every woman in church smiled and made people feel important by their mere smile alone? I mean, it would change the culture of the church. It would change our husbands. It would change our children. And this is what I mean, is that we need to go back to the basic of what it means to be human, and go back into the common sense practice of being polite, being engaging, listening, paying attention, not talking about ourselves the whole entire time, but actually believing and being curious about people's lives. It's, what is it, Ryan? I always say it's, people are tuned into own radio station. What is in it for me? Well, what if we lived our life? How can we serve? What is it in it for other people? How can we serve them? How can we bring value to the people around us? And we live with such profound awareness that every moment is an opportunity to serve other people around us. And I'm not telling you what to do. I am speaking to myself and holding myself accountable for the many times that I might have missed my opportunity to be able to represent, our Lord in the highest level. So this is, to me, the way I feel like I hold myself accountable and saying, what am I wearing? How am I speaking? How am I smiling? What am I not saying? What am I saying? Because there's also the omission of what are we not saying, right? What are we not complimenting? Or why are we not engaging people? And part of the reason sometimes that we don't think about these creative solutions to actually bring people closer, to our Lord, and strategically developing strategies that are simple and basic, is because, number one, there's parts of us that are actually unfulfilled and hurting, and it's costing us to not think outside of the box. Maybe we're unfulfilled in our marriage. Maybe we're unfulfilled and maybe we don't like the woman that we are. Maybe our house is a mess and it's chaotic. And when those things are not in order, it's hard to think outside of the box of strategic ways to actually contribute to the world. I think number two, are a lot of our limiting beliefs. A lot of our limiting beliefs that, you know, um, that this is the way the world is, and that people are just, there's always going to be mean people. There's always going to be, you know, um, people in church are always going to struggle. I mean, there's all these different layering beliefs that I feel like are embedded within us that's holding us back from being the light that I truly believe we are called to. I think we are called to live radical lives of greatness, and begins with us making the ordinary extraordinary. I don't think it needs to be sort of this magnitude of profound, it needs to be sort of a Mother Teresa impact. No, I mean, can you imagine if your presence was memorable? It's so memorable that people say, what does she have? Oh, she has Christ in her. That's what I want. Imagine that one thing to ponder. If your presence was memorable, how could you become a vessel to actually our Lord? And I share this with you because I think that there's a lot of missed opportunities of us thinking very strategically as a woman to live our life as an art where we inspire people. I mean, think about, the Sistine Chapel, or think about the sunset, think about an architecture that's beautiful. It's like, oh my God, it's beautiful. What if you lived your life as an art of being a woman, and instead of pushing truth down people's throat, you are a walking invitation of truth itself, because of you radiate the presence of goodness, truth, beauty, and goodness. And that's what the invitation here, I think, for all of us, primarily myself, is how am I truly living, truth, beauty, and goodness in every second moment of my life, so that I can not just tell people what the truth is, but actually be a living, vessel of truth, because every part of me radiates our Lord. Now, that requires a lot of interior discipline, that requires a lot of interior vigilance, that requires a lot of discipline, um, externally, internally. And it means that we're not going to accept what the norm tells us, right? That it's chaotic, that it's hard, that it's not possible, and this is the way life is. It means that we live a life that's radical, radically beautiful, radically inspiring, radically kind, radically gentle. And it's a challenge. It challenges me to even just think about radical forgiveness. I mean, no, that's really challenging for me. But the alternative is a missed opportunity to lead people to the fullness of truth. So this is us. This is our challenge in our lifetime as women of faith, is how do we live our faith so radiantly that we become so memorable, not because of us, but because of the Christ that lives within us, and that people want more of him because of how we are actually representing him, and not shoving truth down people's throat, but become a living truth that Christ calls us to.